I'm back. Hello. Sorry. But it's not even 2 o'clock, so we're just chatting. So today, just before we sort of officially start, so today we have Dr. Sandra Krempl with us.
Just Sandra's fine.
So Sandra. So we might just go through and give Sandra a chance to say hello to everyone, and then we'll actually do that properly when we properly start. And I'll do that after 2 o'clock. Yeah, so Sandra, would you like to?
Okay, all right. So we've got Jodie, is that right? Jodie, hello Jodie, from Boyup Brook. John, yep. Hello John, John's Bridgetown. We've got Andrea. Hi. Andrea from Dundaragan. And we've got Joe from Brunswick. Is that
Tina from Brunswick. Joe's not able to be here.
Okay, all right. So it's Tina. All right, just as well. We've got this little checkpoint before we start. And Carrie from Gingin. Is that right? Hello, right. Hello everyone. So we've got everybody. Yes, great.
And there's no reason why we can't start.
No reason.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's go. We're ready. We've boarded the plane. We're ready for takeoff. So I'm going to start by saying welcome to everyone, and it's really lovely to see people coming back and having that sense of continuity. So my name's Liz Nicholas, and from Link West, and this is part of the Discovering ABCD series. Before we go any further, can I just ask you to say yes and raise your hand if you're happy for this to be recorded? Everyone? Yes? Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we at Link West are meeting, so the Whadjuk Noongar people, and give thanks for their care for country here, and give thanks to their elders past, present and emerging, and also to extend that respect and acknowledgement to the people who are part of the countries that you are from. And in fact, that's something that we would like to do as part of this series, is to begin to learn who are the traditional custodians of the people where centres out in the regions are. So that's something that will be coming up in future sessions. So I'd like to officially introduce Sandra. So Sandra is Dr. Sandra Krempl, and she's a community engagement practitioner of many years' experience. She's worked in Australia, in New Guinea and around the world through United Nations programs. And in Perth she headed up the Community Arts Network for 8 years and turned that organisation around and turned it into something that probably has had something to do with many centres throughout Western Australia. Sandra has written a book, The 5 Dimensions of Community, and she's made a very generous offer today. If anyone would like to receive a copy of that book, she's brought some in, so just let us know or let Joanna know, and we can send you a copy. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sandra and to hand you over.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me here. And feels like we're talking at such a close proximity, which is really lovely. I also would like to pay my respects to the first people of this land, the Whadjuk Noongar people, where we are sitting. And it's especially important to me because my mother's heritage is Indigenous, but not from here. My mother's heritage is Dayak, and I'm not sure. Raise a hand if you know where the Dayaks are from. Does anybody know? I've seen lots of heads shaking. Yes, so that's fine. The Dayaks are from Borneo. Oh, we've got one hand. Good. Thank you very, very much. Yes, so the Dayaks are from Borneo. And for those of you who don't know, when I feel a little bit cheeky and people ask me where I'm from, I say, Mum's Dayak, brought up by the Dayaks head-hunting tribe from Borneo. So that's my mum's side. But from that Indigenous part, you know, over the world we have Indigenous folk. And that to me is very important. And as we progress, I will also make reference to you thinking about your own Indigenousness, if I can put it that way. Because your families must have come from somewhere that it had its roots for a long, long time. It felt like they'd been there for a while. Or which part of your family would have had long links to where would you think your roots are? So we'll be talking about things like that today. What we are looking at is, in fact, community engagement, but working with diversity. So just go back one step. Sorry. So working with diversity and finding common ground. With finding common ground, I go back to my own family, and as I'm doing this, reflecting myself, if you can think how it reflects, how it mirrors your own story, if you like, because finding common ground for me could appear to be quite tough because my father was Austro-Hungarian, a conductor, cellist. Now, how different a world is that from the world of my mother, who was brought up by the Dayaks, living in long houses. And Mum used to say one time when, do you remember, when fashions changed and women's wear started to, and men's wear, I believe, started to include things that were very G-string-like. And Mum goes, they think it's new? We've had it a long time ago, sort of a thing. So, it's different worlds and different times. So one thing that is common, we all have stories. We all have something that makes us visible. And I always say, you are invisible until your story is told. So I've told a little bit of my story with bringing together the common ground. How could I find a common ground between Mum's early years and my father's aristocratic type background? How could I find that? And yet I did. Dad's link with music was of the spirit of music, and Mum's link with the jungles was very connected to the spirit of nature. There was a common ground that was there. And that's a very interesting essence. And when you talk in terms of finding common ground, you know how some cultures will always start with, oh, where are you from? Maybe your own culture, maybe your own friendship. Where's your dad from? Oh, your accent sounds like, oh, my father came from there. That sort of a thing. Or even, what sort of food do you like? Oh, I like that. No, that's what I don't like. So we're always searching for a way to find common ground. So it's important. And yet, common ground can be extremely challenging when we're working with communities. And we'll go through some of this as well in today's session. But I say, when you don't find common ground, differences are barriers. And when common ground is achieved, differences are appreciated. So when I talk in terms of diversity and community engagement, you get a sense of where I'm heading with this presentation today, I hope. It's talking about your own story, it's your own reflections, because what you find in your own story will help others to find it in theirs. When I tell my story, people usually say to me, oh, yours is unique, ours is bland or something. And yet there is not one person that I have sat down and worked through this with who has not come out and found such richness in their own story. It's just that we are not used to telling the story richly. We are used to saying, oh yes, I come from here, I live here, this is my address, this is my position, my job, and that's it. That's the most boring story we can tell. So it's how do we make it more interesting than that? And if you have any questions or want to pause and ask something whilst I'm staying, just raise your hand and, we'll pull you in. So are we okay with that? Just nod if you're okay with that. Feel free. I like an interactive sort of space. So if you, and if I'm looking too much at the camera and don't see, can one of you prompt me? All right. Okay. So raise your hand so that somebody will catch attention. All right. So let's move on. Here's another form of difference in community. I call it the first and the third person systems. So the third person is something that is more bureaucratic. So when I talk about the written word in third person, what do you think I would be meaning with this? Could I ask Jody, do you have an idea what I mean when I say, third person? We're thinking third person written word. It's not a story, is it? What am I talking about? What sort of documents would it be?
Something that refers to them or they, and it's something that's not personalised at all.
Okay, that's it. It's referring to you've got it, the third person. It's not personalised. How about John? Give me an idea of what you think a third person written word document could be.
Look, it could be an instruction type document. Could be. I would think it could also be a policy type document as well.
Absolutely. Andrea, any comment?
The type of document that's detached.
Very good. Very good. What about Tina?
I don't know, I'm just thinking that, sometimes when you're writing an email or something, and you don't want it to be actually a personal thing, that you'd actually write it in the we sense, we are.
Exactly.
So you
Very.
detach yourself from it, don't you?
Yes. Yes, indeed. And Carrie, any idea? What do you think when we say third person written word?
Third person, you're asking?
Yes, third person, yes.
I picture telling a story on someone else's behalf.
That's right too. That's another way of looking at it. Indeed, you are speaking on behalf of somebody else. That's really good. So we are on that track. It is very much about writing and speaking skills, but it is about not getting emotionally involved as you would when you're telling something that's personally related to you, right? So somebody else's story, or you can embody it too. But in this situation with the third person, somebody did say the word, it was Andrea, wasn't it, who said detached? Yes, so there we go. It's about detached language. It's about detached writing. So the policies, the constitutions, grant writing. Anybody done grant writing? That's very third personish, isn't it? It's all about getting the stats right and all those sorts of things, the objectives, the outcomes, the intended outcomes. And this is all about management and governance. So when we're talking about linking communities, these essences are important. If you take management and governance away from these third-person roles, which need a lot of facts and figures, you need facts and figures before you can have management and governance, right? If you take that all away, this whole system just falls to pieces. it can't work, right? You need the management, you need the governance, you need the facts, and you need the figures. And you have to talk in a detached way, because if you get emotionally involved, you will carry a bias. So what this is usually about is making sure we bring money into a centre, making sure we can trade, transact, we signed a deal, we've got a grant going, we've followed a constitution so that we can organise our organisation or whatever. But we need that for working in community, because these systems are like the bones in our body. If we don't have strong bones, a gymnast would not be able to hold wonderful, poses and in extreme directions without toppling over and collapsing. So the bones in a body are really, really important. And the organisation, and some people are very good at this, and putting this through with holding organisations together. You might be the person in your organisation who has to do a lot of this work. Are you one of those people? You have to put your hand up if you are. Are you one of them? Good. Yes. Some of you, and maybe some of you, are more involved in the other side. So this is the first person. The other side, what we've just been through is the third person. The other side would be the first person. So the first person, I've put it down there on the slide as oral communication. But oral communication is sensory. When you are talking to someone or with someone, you are also open to listening. You are open to their body language. It is a holistic view that you will look at when you are looking at oral communication. And instead of writing and speaking skills, you need listening and observing skills. And is that something that we are very strong at in this day and age, do you feel? Do children in school get a lot of education in that? Do our communities get a lot of time with that? Do your communities get a lot of time with that? Anybody want to comment about how they feel about listening and observing? Anybody have a particular comment with that one or not?
I think it's less. I think
it's
we're heading to less.
Why do you feel we're heading to less? That's Carrie, isn't it? Yes.
It is. I think things like social media is doing that for us.
Yes, indeed. So social media is playing a part now of that, and it's missing a lot of other elements, isn't it? When you do it, I don't know. What are your comments? Anybody else have a view about more or less that's happening about listening skills and observing skills? Anybody want to?
Yeah, I think they're definitely diminishing. I actually work as a supervisor in schools for students who are on prac, and I notice in the schools that the children are very visually dependent. You know, everything's on a big screen that does lots of things, and the listening skills, communication skills are diminishing, definitely.
Yeah. So how can we do things to bring that back, I suppose, is something that we need to focus on. If anybody else wants to comment, or shall I just move on, or anybody else? Go on.
I think particular industries are good at it. So the arts and cultural industries are usually really good at listening and observing. I think you get particular personalities that are really good at it. But yeah, I agree with the girls that it is diminishing with the younger people that are coming up, and I don't know whether that's a technology thing or...
Yeah, so they win something and they lose something, I suppose. John, have you got a point on that?
Yeah, look, I probably tend to disagree with what's just being, not disagree, but I have a different slope on it, I guess. I find in our business, and I'm talking about the CRC business, that a significant amount of our time is spent exactly in this mode, listening, talking firsthand to people about what the issues might be, whether they come in here to talk about their entitlements under Centrelink, whether they come in here to talk about entitlements to other issues, whether they just come in and ask an opinion about whether we can do something. It's our business is really related to that sort of contact. But having said all of that, some of the people that we work with, and these are some of the large institutions like Centrelink, even like the department that we're contracted to, have driven people towards doing things online. So they've lost that personal contact, and that's at the if you like, at the peak level. But on the ground where we are, I'm still finding that this is a very important part of our process. And if you're not listening, or if you're not listening well enough, then people will become either disgruntled, angry, or misconstrue what's happening. So I still see it as a really important fundamental skill, and from the point of view that I see in, we practice it pretty strongly.
Yes, no, that's great. Thank you. I see diversity of points is really good. Jodie, did you have a point to raise with this?
John, I completely agree with what you're saying, and we do spend a lot of time just having to listen to people and listening to our communities, and unfortunately we're being told a lot of the time what our communities need, and maybe some other people are not listening to us. And I'm also doing a tuning into teens parenting course at the moment, and that's all about listening and observing emotions and reactions and body language and things. So I'm really in this space at the moment. So it's I do feel that it is diminishing generally in the general population, but it's such an important part of just learning about how to deal with people and communication, and kids really need to be taught these skills.
Thank you. Very good views there. Thank you indeed for sharing all of that. We'll come back to just the slides, and I'll complete that left-hand column to show what I'm trying to get at with this. So in the third person, you can see the word detached as the process, I presume. So then, in the first person, the word would be what?
Attached.
Engaged.
Yes, attached. Any other word?
Engaged.
Just feel free. Yes.
Engaged.
Engaged. Absolutely. Involved, whatever. So that's great. Now, the next one, we've got management and governance on the right-hand side as the core element. On the left-hand side, oh, sorry, is it left and right for you as well? It is, yes. On the first person side, what would replace? Now, if management and governance was taken away, that whole third person process would collapse, wouldn't it? If you didn't have management, you didn't have governance, that whole system that we work in would disappear. So what would be the equivalent in the first person? What would be the equivalent in the first person what would be the foundational bit? That if we took it away, that whole first person, that ability to listen, to engage, all of that would disappear. What is it that holds that essence together? Anybody want to have a thought, hazard a guess with that one? There's no right and wrong. How about we start with Andrea? You are at the top of my screen, so what do you think? It's no right and wrong. What is the glue there?
Engagement.
Right, okay, yes. That's very important, isn't it? Very important. What about Carrie? What do you think is the core? What's the essence? If we took that away, this part will disappear.
I see it as being in person.
In person, yes, indeed. Thank you. Jodie?
Even that common ground and the sharing, the actual sharing of stories.
It's the sharing. It is the actual sharing. John?
Yeah, look, I think that Jodie's on the right track. I think it's about that that whole essence of involvement, sharing, the listening thing. I'm having a bit of trouble getting the word that goes there, but I know where it means.
You all got the right essence, I'm sure. We're all on the same track. Tina, have you got some wise words of wisdom there to add?
I think I have actually. I think we're all talking around what you're directing us to. So I'll let you say it.
All right. All right. And this is not set in gold or concrete. From my experience, this is just a starting point for conversation. What I have said here is we've got to have a collective vision. If we have a collective vision, we know who we are and where we're going, then there is an essence that we're working together. Otherwise, it's a them and us, right? And we've got to have that shared ideas. We've got to have a common ground of beliefs. And when I say beliefs, it's sort of principles and values. What do you think? Do you think that sounds like it can hinge things together? And instead of facts and figures in the third person, there's something like facts and figures you need to feed up to the management and governance, to keep the management and governance going, right? And we spend, I don't know how much time you spend, putting together facts, figures, reports, and all of these things to keep your projects going. I see some nods there, right? What would be the equivalent then that we need to spend or do to keep that first person alive and well? What would we need? Shall I just move along, or would you like to hazard? Would anybody like to put your word out there? Go on. Don't worry. Just go for it if you feel you've got a word. I see Carrie has got a big smile on her face.
I'm laughing. I'm waiting for someone to say something.
Right.
I'll have
we
a
got
go.
that, Andrea. Jodie, go on.
Opportunity.
Opportunity.
Actually, an opportunity to be heard.
Yes, it is very much about an opportunity to be heard. That's a very good idea, very good point. Anybody else want to hazard a guess?
I'd like to see that we've got the time, the actual time to share those visions, to be involved. I think time is an important issue.
Time is a huge issue, isn't it? It's absolutely huge. Yes, anybody else? Who is it? Trust? You're on the same track as me there. It's not right and wrong. I actually think opportunity and time are very important because if it's creating the setting. The opportunity is almost creating the setting for enabling people to come together. And this is not, please, this is just guide words. You make it your own. This is just for the conversation. Carrie, did you have something you wanted to share? No? Tina? So, you're right? Okay. Tina, did you have anything?
No, fine. That's good. Yeah, no.
Right. Okay. And the thing is, like with this, facts and figures, we spend a lot of time gathering. How much time do we allocate to actually grow trust and respect? That's just something to think about. I remember when I was doing a lot of work with street kids, I felt I just needed to hang around until they were ready to ask me the questions. And that took months and months. And I just hung around in their location and, did things in my own space until somebody actually came up to me and started to ask me questions. What are you doing that for? What is this about? Oh, maybe you should do it this way. And then the conversation starts. So the opportunity and the time it felt like time wasted to some of my colleagues, but in the end, that was so precious because it brought in other people that would never have come in otherwise. So it's allowing people to come in at their own space. And at the bottom line of this is not money. What could it be? I'm going to move along because I want to end up with something else. It's a sense of belonging. It's belonging. And just, so this is the first and third person. And just to show that there are different worlds that are very comfortable in the first person and not comfortable in the third person. Would you know people who are comfortable in the first person and not in the third person world? Nod your head if you yes, or shake your head if it's no. Yeah. You would know people. I mean, I know a number of communities who just feel the third person world is a nightmare. You know, it's something that's not natural to them. You have to learn the systems, etc., to be able to operate in it. And yet there are some people, and I'm sure some of you amongst them as well, would be very at home with the third person world. And it's how do we bridge these two? Because when we talk even about oral tradition communities, the common ground I find is to say, in families, you have your own order. You have your own third person process. People have got duties, they've got jobs, etc. And how you communicate that, you might not need to write it down, or you might have things on the fridge or whatever. You know, so you have your own systems. I bring back, when I'm talking on a broad scale, I bring it back usually to family or community to see how it can work in that space. So, any questions at the moment with the first and the third person? Jody, any questions? You right? John?
Yeah.
You all right? Okay. Andrea?
Yes, I'm right. Thank you.
You're right? Thank you. Joe?
Tina?
Oh, sorry, Tina. Tina, yes. Yes, I better cancel that one. Joe out. Tina, sorry. Yes. Are you okay with the first and third person? Yes, good. And Carrie?
Very interesting.
Okay, so there's other aspects to this, but I won't go there now. It's actually expanded into a third and a fourth column, but we won't go there today. What we'll do is move along to now think about how you make yourself visible to different people. Because to build trust and respect, you need to make yourself visible. So we're not talking about third-person documents and things. We are building trust and respect to get community together. So who are you? Or you can ask, or we can ask ourselves, who am I? And in this, it's how do you usually introduce yourself? How confident are you at doing something like what I did at the very beginning? Just going out there and saying, oh, my mum's from here, my dad's from there. And do you do that at all? Does any of you introduce yourself with some heritage link or with some other bit? How many of you would feel, how would you introduce yourselves to somebody new? Jody?
I certainly have not in the past done any sort of background, but there's no reason why I couldn't. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I probably would introduce myself as being from Boyart Brook, and then if the response was, well, how long have you been there? I've been there for this long, but I was actually born in Corrigan. Yeah, so a little bit of my background there. That's generally what I would do.
Good, thank you. Tina, what about you? How do you normally describe yourself to somebody brand new?
I guess, yeah, I probably do locate myself. I'm not originally from these shores, you might gather. So I guess that really is my sort of introduction, that I've arrived here, I've been here, what keeps me here, that sort of thing, really.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
Good, that's great. Kerry?
I've two common things I say when I'm introducing myself. I either come from the point of being a mother of four, because that was my first role in life, or I say I'm a Bullsbrook girl.
Okay, good, good. We've got Andrea as well, haven't we? Yes, go on.
I definitely refer to where I come from because it's the centre of the universe.
Yes, good. Good.
Narrabeen, I don't know how many times I've been overseas and ran into somebody who knows somebody or has been there, and it's the tiniest place in the middle of nowhere. And yes, I always refer to the beautiful place that I live now in Jurien Bay on the beach. So I do locate myself, definitely.
Great, that's fantastic. And John, how do you introduce yourself?
Probably, Sandra, it probably depends who I'm introducing myself to.
Yes.
If it's somebody that's, you know, totally new to me, I'll probably give them some introduction about who I am now, and if that needs to be further expressed, then I might give them some plot of history. I very, very rarely would refer to heritage issues, except in the sense that it would depend on how the conversation was led, but I would almost never say, I've got Greek heritage or something like that. In certain circumstances, particularly if I'm away from here, I might say that, I'm now camped in Bridgetown and describe the place to them and let them know what it's like. But yeah, probably not, certainly not on the heritage side, no.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. And you're right, John, there's time and place for all sorts of introductions. So we have to bear that in mind. What I'm going to do here is a tool for storytelling, and then I'm going to tell a story about how it's been used in different places. So this tool is quite interesting, I suppose, in a sense that when you go into a new community, you can find common ground quite quickly. Not everybody is willing to talk about all aspects, but there will be somebody that would be able to talk about some aspects through the identity wheel. So, for example, if I said to somebody, what are your customs or your traditions? And that usually stuns people here. This not so much nowadays, but when I first started my journey doing community engagement and cultural planning in Australia, I would say, what are your customs and traditions? And they would say, oh, that's other people have them, we don't. So, it would be, don't you meet with your family once a week, or or go out for sporting something with different friends, or go for a Christmas retreat or whatever? Those are all customs. So, how would you describe the customs in your community or for yourself? Let's do it for yourself now. What are customs that you would think of? Let's start with Andrea. What customs? What customs do you have? This is just to build the who are you, because if we're going to do it, we need to do it for ourselves before we can apply it to community. So, what are your customs, Andrea?
I definitely have, even though I'm not religious, the Easter and Christmas with the family. We definitely, myself and my partner, have the getaway to the beach, usually on a daily basis.
Great, great.
I'm not sure what others. I meditate through art, so I suppose that's a
custom too. That's great. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
I can't think too much of
You've given heaps. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. And Kerry?
I think the only thing that springs to my mind is the old Christmas and Easter as well.
Right,
Right. Yeah, I don't. I'm sure there's more, but nothing's coming.
Right, that's fine. That's not a problem. Jodie?
Yes, the Christmas, Easter. My family also does we have our own family footy tipping competitions.
Right. Glad to come in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. AFL Grand Final Day, there's certain things that we generally do that are the same every year because my kids say, it's just tradition, we have to do it.
That's good. That's terrific. And what about you, John? What are your customs?
We don't have a lot of those family type things, although, and we're a very disparate family in that sense. I guess my customs are probably built around things like my hobbies, the things that I particularly like to do with my wife, and they relate to just having a good time, enjoying life, going out for dinner on a regular basis. I love my sport, so I don't care what season it is. There's always some decent sport to be involved in. Yeah.
That's great. Terrific. And we've got Tina as well. What are your customs?
My personal customs are probably around food, actually, and yeah, definitely roast dinners on a Sunday. Sunday's family day. I think that's probably a big custom for all of us, even though we're not all in the same country. It's still a family day, so we know we can always get hold of each other. And there's a bit of a laugh, really. We have something that we play every Boxing Day, and that's Malteser soccer with straws and Maltesers. So that's a custom.
That's great. That's great. And you can imagine sharing this with your wider community and just enjoying hearing what they're saying and reflecting as well. So thanks for sharing that. What would you say, we will do heritage later, what would you say if I said environment? How would you describe the environment in relation to your heritage? Who would like to go first? Don't all jump in at once. Let me choose then. Kerry, you ended up. How about you start?
Are you picking on me?
Yes.
When I think about heritage and environment together, I just think of my religious upbringing. That's where I go.
Okay. So the environment. Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, and what about Tina?
Yeah, what does environment mean? It's really funny because my family have distributed around the globe, and we all seem to sort of like have been attracted to similar areas in the terrain, and we're never far away from the coast. So that kind of, the beach thing is definitely a big thing for us, even though the beaches are very different. Yeah, that's quite.
So the environment is the beach?
Mm-hmm.
All right, terrific. What about, we've got Andrea then.
For me, it's isolation. I felt quite disjointed when I went and lived in the city for a while. I feel more comfortable when I'm actually in the environment and in a natural environment rather than a built environment.
Right.
And that feeling of isolation gives me comfort.
Great. That's wonderful to hear. That's great. John?
Yeah, look, I'm a little bit the same. I'm a born and bred city boy, but have been in this environment for about 14 or 15 years now, and it's something that I've come to enjoy, and certainly Tina, I don't enjoy the built environment anymore. It's a place for others, I understand that, but my like now is the freedom, the fresh air, and in this place, those chilly winters. Really, yeah, that's my environment these days.
Well, That's lovely. That's good to hear. Chilly winters included as well. And Jodie?
Yeah, I'm not so much a fan of the chilly winters, but I live in a place where there are chilly winters, so I have to put up with it. But I'm background has been in agriculture. Grew up on a farm, not actually on a farm now, but have access to a farm, natural environment. I think it's very much, we're now living and working in the regions, and if we didn't enjoy that, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm getting to know you all much better already. Yeah. So, but you can see how this can open up, and you can get to know different people. Won't go through every one of these, but let's take in turns. Like, you could ask under inspiration, what inspires people, and that just takes a little bit of unwrapping. You need to know what inspires you, because if you're facilitating this sort of group, sometimes you might just need to lead with your story of what inspires you, and then others feel more open about that. And it just makes that community so rich to hear these stories. The word wealth, what does that mean to different people? And maybe what are their experiences with that word? In their lives and their, family, etc. And of course, art form, that could be creativity, it could be all sorts of different things there. Spirituality, it doesn't have to be religion. It could be, if it is for people, it can be all sorts of other aspects of spirit, the spirit of nature, the spirit of community. It's alive and well there. Life is about spirit. So how do we engage and bring this to the fore? And I'm just going to show you how I've broken down one area, heritage. I've broken it down into Indigenous, Eastern, Western, urban, and rural. And just getting people to unpack. Remember at the beginning, I said, each one of you must have some sort of an indigenousness, if you like. Where do you feel your indigenous heritage comes from? For me, I was quite distant from my father's people, although I love the music of Hungary. So I feel a strong link to that. But my indigenousness is absolutely with the jungles. Not even the jungles of Borneo, because I wasn't brought up with that. I was brought up in the tropics. And in my childhood, I knew wild tigers and wild elephants used to roam in the jungles for me. So that, for me, was my indigenous. I feel that is where I am more at home than anywhere else. But slowly that has shifted to Australia. And the most outstanding experience I've had here is with Indigenous colleagues who've brought me out to the inland bush, where the silence of the inland bush is just uncanny. So for me, that's sort of my indigenousness. It's linked back to nature, and it's linked back to more, for me, my roots would be more tropical. And then for me, of course, there's Eastern, there is Western, which is my upbringing. I grew up in a country that was a colonial base. So there's lots that I have learnt through that, through having those sorts of opportunities. And then there's the urban and rural. So you can hear through my story some of those things creeping in. Who would like to just have a go at one of these? Shall I pick somebody? Tina, how does this sit with you?
Well,
any of these? Yeah.
Defining heritage into those categories.
Yes, finding heritage into those categories.
Okay, yeah, you're right. We all have an Indigenous background of sorts. And I guess, yeah, I do associate myself definitely with the Western and rural background. So, yeah, that's definitely my heritage.
Great. Thank you for that. John?
I guess my my heritage on both sides of my family, my father's side and my mother's side, is very much European, and a really strange mix from Welsh on my father's mother's side and Greek on my father's side. And on my mother's side, very much English. In fact, they were in the first group of white settlers that settled in South Australia. And as probably most of you know, South Australia was a free settlement colony. It wasn't convicts like Western Australia or New South Wales or Tasmania. They were free settlers under the Wakefield Plan. So they were the first. They were part of that group. So I guess I've got a very much a European indigenous background. Obviously lived for a long time in that urban environment, so I still have part of that with me. But these days I would consider myself rurally heritage. So yeah, there's a fair cross section there. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That was most interesting. Kerry, what about you?
I would now say I'm European Western rural.
Right. Great. Thank you for that. And we've got Andrea.
I'm come from a British background with my parents, but I don't really associate with that much. So much. I'm an Eastern wheat belt girl, and
Right. You've used Eastern well.
and yeah, I have a absolute passion for the Australian bush and the landscape, and that's what I mainly associate with.
That's terrific. Thank you. And Jodie?
I would say the English Western rural, for sure, for me. But I'll also just mention that I have spent, last week, I spent 3 days in the Pilbara on a tour through Leadership WA, and we actually spent a day in Roebourne and talked to a lot of Indigenous community leaders, and just had, the heritage and the richness of their culture is just unbelievable, and it was really, really special few days.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, Iramagadu. Did you come across that word in Roebourne? Iramagadu?
Yes, I don't know what it means, I must say. Yes.
Place. And yeah, that's a fascinating place actually, because I know it's a bringing together of peoples who weren't naturally from that place, the first peoples. They were brought there for, that's really interesting history. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. Thanks everybody for sharing. And you can see how this can, again, open, and people, how I've done this even with different communities is just open up a map, a world map, and say to people, where were you born? And it might seem like a simple, corny thing, but when people get to express this and you see the shared connections, it's quite interesting. Because put a pin on a map or a dot where you were born, and then see where were your children born, and put it, spots on the dot on the maps as well, and where were your parents and grandparents born. And it's amazing what you actually find. And through doing this identity wheel workshop, I have found that there were people who were born on the Vladivostok railway. There were people who were born in international waters. Our community is, and this is in Western Australia, finding these stories through Western Australian connections. It's just so interesting. And there's one other diversity as well as similarity. And this fits both into the third person as well as into the first person worlds. And I usually get to ask people if they were to choose one of these words only to describe their strength, which one would it be? And people will go, that's too hard, I've got a bit of everything. But I will stress, for this exercise, just choose one that's just a little tiny bit stronger than all the rest. So I'm going to put this to you. We're going to use show of hands. And you're only going to choose one, your strong point. And of course, you can only do it, raise your hand once, okay? So who in our little community, online community today, who would say their strength is analytical? Nobody, okay. Who would say their strength is visionary? Put your hand in front of your face. Good, we've got one there. Who is caring? Got 2 hands go up. And who is meticulous? That's interesting. Thank you for that. We didn't have analytical, but we got meticulous. And I'll tell you why it is so interesting. Because usually in community, we have very few who want to put their hands up for meticulous. And you would get people putting their hands up for analytical, visionary, caring, and when it comes to meticulous, there's no one. And I will say, forget it, go home, whatever you're doing, it's not going to work. So basically, you've got to have a mix of all to make an organization run, as you can well see. And the other part of this is the challenge of working collectively, because a meticulous and visionary person might conflict. Can you see that happening?
Yep.
Yes. I have learned to be more meticulous, but I am the one who wants to go out there and run off and do things, and I need a meticulous person to say, no, slow down, you've got to do this first, complete this before you can go and start the other one, right? So need that sort of person. And you can also see that, a caring person can sometimes lock into that and not think or consider the other aspects as well. So there's all sorts of different aspects with this character, just to get people to identify who they are, what their strengths are. I remember one time I was working with a council, Shire Council, and running this with them, running this identity workshop with them, just to get them into a space of being human rather than just talking about policy all the time, right? And we came to this character bit, and I said analytical, and there was quite a large council, there was about more than 14 people on it. And analytical, I think there was 1 or 2 hands up, went up. And then I said visionary, and everybody else put their hand up. And they looked at each other and they go, so that's our problem. So, you can see that sort of thing happening as well. It's an interesting thing to share with people when there are a little bit of conflict. What personality types, and can we actually do without what we're saying is the toughness of bringing the partnership together or the team together. So I have used this identity wheel in various different situations, and in a rather challenging situation where we were working with people, newly arrived migrants, who had very little English, and the task was to get them to act local and be global. Now that's a concept and a half to get across for non-English speaking people. But we did, using the identity wheel, seeing what global knowledge they could bring in and what they were doing locally and what the challenges were moving from global to local, etc. And it was so absolutely amazing. because there were hidden jewels in that community that we had no idea about before going through the identity wheel, talking through art forms and environment and all sorts of other things like that. No idea at all that there was a classical flautist, a Chinese flautist from mainland China. And so she eventually brought her, I don't know the name of the instrument, and she played it. And through that process, there were links made with the Western Australian Symphony Orchestra. And she actually had a gig down the track playing with them. There were other people in that community who were dancers, contemporary, classical. There were people who had martial arts backgrounds. All sorts of other things emerged that they had no idea were there. And then there were, of course, fantastic cooks. So they had demonstrations of cooking, etc., who to Thai food. And it was amazing because after the sharing of stories, people felt they could try to speak in English even if they were making a mess of it. They were now friends enough. They had, gone past their feeling vulnerable about their English. And they achieved such wonderful things. We didn't put the YouTube on here, but I think you are going to be able to share it with you or just to have a look at to see what came from it. And so, the identity wheel, I've used this in building broken communities as well, in bridging corporates where you've got chambers of commerce and others, to stop the them and us and to get people invested in the community by telling story. So this is one of the tools that I have used. And I hope that it can be useful for you. I think we're getting close to time, so I'll hand over. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sandra. As usual, Sandra's come and done some work also with LinkWest and always brings amazing gifts to us. So thank you so much, Sandra, once again. And yeah, so I was just thinking on, so this series is about asset-based community development, and last month we had Cormac Russell talking about, one of the things he was talking about was finding the connectors in community, finding the ways to engage. And I suppose we've heard a bit today from Sandra about how to actually connect, how to connect through using our own stories and inviting other people's stories. So all of these things will be going towards looking at the whole picture as we go through the year of finding assets, discovering assets, connecting assets, and then helping create the conditions where people can do things together for the benefit of community. So thank you again so much, Sandra. And just to remind people that if you would like a picture, if you'd like it more than a picture, if you'd like a copy of Sandra's book, which is wonderful.
It's an old book, by the way.
It's an old book, but a good book, an oldie but a goodie. Please let Joanna know. And Joanna, have you said hello to everyone? Joanna actually is, as usual, sitting beside doing all the technical work for this.
I'm just lurking. They're off to the side.
So yeah, so Joanna will make sure that you get a copy if you like, and also we'll send a copy of the YouTube link. And is there anything else that we need to say, Joanna? Oh, and also we'll send you a copy of the presentation, and we'll be uploading if you would like a copy of it. But we'll be uploading, or Joanna will be uploading it as usual to the YouTube channel. So with that, we'll say goodbye. Hope to see everyone next time. So next month, I think, as usual, Joanna will send you out the time and the topic in a couple of weeks, and hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Very useful.
Bye.
Bye.